Hello YouTube, it's Mr. Mags here, back with another stupid Nintendo article. And apparently, Michael Caruso from TheGamer either got bored with his 10 Pokemon that look nothing like their type series of articles, or just couldn't find any other types to make articles on, so he decided to switch it up a bit, and is now doing articles called The 10 Weirdest of blank type. He's already made 2 of them so far, and I'll definitely get to the other one later. But the strangest part about this so far is that they read almost identically to, let's say, the 10 Pokemon that look nothing like dragon types. This one is the 10 weirdest grass type Pokemon, but the way it's worded, the way it's like structured, it's almost identical to those lists. Like same reasoning for why he doesn't like them. So I don't really know why he decided to switch up the wording of the title, but whatever. All this means that there's more content for me to roast him on, which is fantastic. Like, I don't want to just only dunk on this one guy over and over again, but he keeps giving me just golden opportunities because of his just weird and sometimes very, very bad opinions. So, let's get on with it. Grass types are generally popular Pokemon, but not all of them are well received. That could literally be said about every single type. But anyway, here are the 10 weirdest grass type Pokemon. Grass type Pokemon have very distinct appearances, and most of them are based on plants or animals that have plants growing on top of them. Grass types are regarded as one of the strongest and most iconic in the series because of how many have been introduced and the fact that every generation has a grass type starter. Fans enjoy using grass type Pokemon in battle, and most of them are incredibly speedy, making for creatures that can defeat your opponents using a lot of different tactics. So, that's a little weird, because grass as a type actually has their speed stat being their lowest overall base stat total. On Bulbapedia, every single type has an aggregate of every single Pokemon and then every single fully evolved Pokemon to tell you what their highest overall base stat total and then what the lowest base stat total is. Their highest, I believe, is the attack stat, and the lowest is speed stat. There are some very fast Pokemon, Superior and Sceptile come to mind specifically, but most grass types aren't that fast. So you say most are incredibly speedy, even stuff that kind of looks speedy, like Breloom, only have, I think, 70 speed. Then you have other stuff like Vileplume and Blossom, which with the chlorophyll ability can get fast, but their base speed isn't that fast. So I don't know, that might just be a little nitpick, but if he had said some are incredibly speedy, that'd be one thing, but he said most, so I'm calling him out on it. However, there are many grass-type Pokemon that are more weird than powerful, and some of them are ones that fans don't understand at all. And just like with the other lists I made, from now on, every time he says the word fans, I will interchange it with the word Michael and switch out the pronouns and other grammatical stuff to kind of fit that. Because almost all of these, they're only things that he has a problem with or that he doesn't understand. So, starting off with number 10, Sunflora. Sunflora is very weird looking because it is basically just a living sunflower. There are a few Pokemon in the franchise that is based on flowers. It should say there are a few Pokemon that are based on flowers, but whatever. Or themed around them in general, and Sunflora is definitely one of the most peculiar ones because of the leaves that it has for legs and arms and its smiling face. I'm a little confused why you're confused, because last I checked, sunflowers have leaves, and it's a Pokemon, so it's gonna have arms and legs, and the face on the flower part makes sense. Is Sunflora very, very basic? Yes, it is a very basic Pokemon. Like, if I were to ask any given person to make an anthropomorphic sunflower, or make what they would think a sunflower Pokemon would look like, this is what it would be. It is very basic. It is a sunflower with the leaves being arms, have little legs, and the face on the sunflower part. But that's not weird. That's just kind of what Pokemon are. Like, I'd probably say a good solid quarter of all Pokemon are just take what is based on, add a couple of elements, there's your Pokemon. It's not an exact science, but I feel like in general that's kind of how it goes. Many Michaels consider Sunflower to be a very weird creature, and it's one of the least known Pokemon from Gen 2. Luckily, Sunflora does have some powerful attacks in its arsenal, so it's still worth catching despite how weird it is. So, throughout this entire list, and any other list he's ever going to make regarding top 10 weird Pokemon from this type, almost all of his arguments go as follows. Sunflora is a weird Pokemon, and that makes him weird. Isn't that weird, guys? I'm not making that up. What argument did he make here? That a sunflower Pokemon has eyes and a leg, has eyes, arms, and legs? That people don't know it exists, even though I feel it's not one of the most popular Pokemon, but like people know who Sunflora is. But even if they didn't, that doesn't necessarily make it weird. There's probably quite a number of Gen 6, 7, and 8 Pokemon that some fans just don't know about because they maybe fell off the series or whatnot. That doesn't make them inherently weird just because people don't know they exist. So if your only argument is some people might not know it exists and it looks like a Pokemon because it's an anthropomorphized sunflower, that's not an argument. I could easily see someone having an argument for Sunflora. Just kind of look at it. It's very basic. If your argument was it's too similar to a normal sunflower, just slapped on arms and legs, I would gladly entertain that. But you basically said it's weird because it has these. You didn't specifically say they should have done more with it. You're just like, it's weird. Sunflowers don't actually have faces. That's weird. Like, that's not an argument. Anyway, I'll probably be repeating that similar mantra throughout this entire article, so I'll move on from Sunflora for now. Dhelmise. Dhelmise is a grass type that is themed around an anchor from a ship. It is basically just a living anchor that can compete in Pokemon battles, and Michael wonders how its body functions as it should just really be a hunk of metal. Okay. Either Michael didn't know, or didn't care enough to look up the fact that Dhelmise is actually a grass ghost type. The anchor itself is not actually the Pokemon. It's the moss that's on the, or like algae, whatever, that's on the anchor. In fact, if we go to Dhelmise's Bulbapedia page, again, a website that Michael really should get acquainted with, if we go down to his Pokedex entries, what appears to be green seaweed is actually its body. So, fans don't wonder how its body functions because its body is the seaweed. Without the seaweed connected to the anchor, it would just be a hunk of metal, but the hunk of metal is not its actual body. Regardless, Michael will forever think of Dhelmise as one of the weirdest Pokemon to come out of the franchise to date, and it is without a doubt one of the most peculiar inanimate objects Pokemon in the series. Again, he's just like, it's weird because I think it's weird. Isn't that weird? Yes, it's an inanimate object if you exclude the fact that it's possessed seaweed that's covering the anchor, and that's what gives us an appearance. There are several other just weird inanimate object Pokemon that make even less sense. Like Clink? What is Clink? It's just two gears that are not even a ghost type. There's Pokemon that are based on ice cream, based on cupcakes. Like, there are probably close to 100 Pokemon now, those are almost 900, that are just based on random things. And a good half of them aren't even ghost types. Like Honedge, sure, it's a sword that's possessed by a ghost spirit, whatever. But yeah, Clink in its evolved forms are just gears that are held together by magnetic forces or whatever. It's just being an inanimate object Pokemon does not inherently make you weird because there is precedent going back to even Generation 1 for random inanimate object Pokemon. And again, people don't think it's weird because its body is the seaweed. Rillaboom! Rillaboom is the final evolution of the grass-type starter from Generation 8, and Michael finds it weird because it has a drum that is constantly next to it after it comes out of the Pokeball. I'll read the rest and then get back to that. There are a few Pokemon in the franchise that have objects that are in sync with their bodies. However, Rillaboom is one of the weirdest because his drum is so giant and Michael can't exactly explain where it comes from. One thing's for sure, Rillaboom loves its drum. Okay, first of all, its drum isn't even that big. Honestly, I feel Rillaboom's drum should be bigger. Like, he brought, either he or the editor or someone, brought in this picture for the thumbnail for this entry, and it's like less than half its size, so it's not that big. If anything, the weirder part is the fact that its drumsticks look like literal drumsticks. They're not just like random sticks from like the other two had. They're literally look like drumsticks with a little ball on the end. That is weird. Not the drum itself. So the drum being huge is not a problem because it's not even that big. Second, clearly Michael just like hasn't played the video game this thing is from, because in every single playthrough, no matter who you pick as a starter, you will see Rillaboom either on you, Leon, or Hop's team. And if you ever saw Rillaboom come into battle, you'll see when he exits the Pokeball, he puts his hand on the ground and kind of rises out of the ground is the drum, implying that the drum is basically a seed he carries around with him that he grows into the drum when he enters a battle. So that's where it comes from. Fans can't explain where it comes from. If you played the video game, you could tell he grows it every time he enters a battle. It's not that weird. Okay, moving on. Tangrowth. Tangrowth is a bad Pokemon. There are very, very few Pokemon in the franchise that I legitimately will say that is a bad Pokemon. Tangrowth is one of them. The design in a vacuum is fine. It's just a bunch of vines, it's whatever. But the fact that it evolves from Tangela, who is, a pretty decent clump of vines with boots, and like you can see that there's something inside of it, and the Pokedex entries say that within the vines there's some ancient being that like people have never actually seen before, and no one's actually sure what's beneath those vines. That's actually a pretty cool concept. And the fact that it evolves with ancient power makes you think, similarly how Piloswine evolves into Mamoswine, where it kind of reverts into like a prehistoric version of itself, you would think Tangela is going to use ancient power and evolve into whatever is inside of Tangela, still having the vine elements, but the creature inside will be more pronounced. Whereas instead, it's just a bigger Tangela with fingernails. I don't know why it has fingernails. That will always bug me. It looks bad. Also, its boots transform into these little red stubs. It's a bad Pokemon. Especially since Tangela, the vines weren't like so compact. It wasn't just a massive vines. It was as if the vines were surrounding something. Whereas here, it's just a huge, dense clump of vines, and it's just kind of, I don't know. I don't really like it. They could have done way more with the evolution of Tangela, and they just dropped the ball on this one. Tangrowth is the evolution of Tangela, and it was added in Generation 4. It's a powerful Pokemon with high stats. However, otherwise, its body is very peculiar looking, especially because it seems that there's nothing beneath all the vines. If we're going off the same assumption that Tangela had something inside of it and that still carried over, I'm honestly not even sure if that is still the case, but these vines seem to make up Tangrowth's body, and that doesn't seem to make much sense from a biology standpoint. It's Pokemon! There are many Pokemon that are just plants. Sunflora, up at the top, is just a plant. You didn't complain about its biology specifically. Who's to say if Pokemon actually do have organs or whatever, the organs aren't inside of the vines? You see a little window with eyes there. There's clearly something inside of it. Of all those things to complain about Tangrowth, you complain about its biology and not the fact that it doesn't really expand on the ideas that Tangela presented. It's just more of that. It's just a bigger, denser version of Tangela. Oh, but here, this paragraph has the Michael Caruso double dose of his stereotypes, because almost every single previous list I did, actually, yeah, I think every single list before, he would constantly, in at least 3 per list, complain about the biology of the Pokemon not making sense, and or he demands that Game Freak explains what the Pokemon is, either in Pokédex entries or otherwise in a future game. So here, hopefully, Tangrowth gets some better explanation in the future through a Pokédex entry, because right now, Michael can't make heads or tails of it. Again, I already explained that Tangrowth, or at least Tangela Pokédex entries say that there is some ancient being living inside of it, surrounded by the vines. I haven't read Tangrowth's Pokédex entries in a while. I probably should have done that before starting this video, but I have a feeling a similar concept carries over to Tangrowth. So that explains both the biology of it and the explanation that you're looking for. So if you just went to Bulbapedia every once in a while, you would know this, and therefore Game Freak doesn't need to explain themselves because they already did. But even if they didn't specifically explain your every single question in the Pokédex, they're not going to have a random room full of 900 NPCs that just give you an entire, essays worth of backstory in every single Pokemon. That would be ridiculous. Moving on. Tropius. Tropius is a Pokemon I honestly really, really like. I don't know, I've just always liked its design. I feel like it just comes together very nicely, and I don't know, I really like it. Tropius is supposed to be a dinosaur that can fly, and its tree-like body gives it a structure that leaves a lot up to interpretation. I don't really know why he says that, but we'll continue. Michael wonders why the developers decided to design it in such a way that it seems to be modeled after multiple different objects, such as a dinosaur, a bird, and also a tree. So, hang on, you're complaining that a Pokemon is based off of many different things. So you complain if a Pokemon is based on too many different things, but you also complain if a Pokemon is based on too few things like Sunflora. What do you want from like do you I don't I don't see how what exactly do you want out of Pokemon if arguably three things? Because honestly, I don't even know if you'd really count him as being part bird. They just took the big leaves of a banana tree and like slapped those and onto him and gave him wings. I wouldn't say just because he can fly, he's based on a bird. If anything, he looks more bat-like, but maybe or more bug-like, honestly. Yeah, like kind of dragonfly-esque. But they're just wings. They're not bird specific. So arguably three, definitely at least two things. You complain about Sunflora just being a sunflower. So what do you want? Like, do you want every single Pokemon to look exactly like a real world thing and nothing more? I don't know. Although Tropius is very weird in design, fans everywhere love its appearance and consider it to be one of the best and most unique Hoenn Pokemon ever. Like I just said, I like Tropius, but I wouldn't consider it the best designed Pokemon from Hoenn. Mainly because Hoenn has some of the best designed Pokemon, period. Salamence, Aggron, even Hariyama, Medicham, all the starters, Manectric, like, there is a lot of fantastically designed Pokemon from Gen 1. And Tropius is definitely one of them, but I wouldn't consider him the best by far. But again, he does the thing where he's like, although it has a weird design, even though he never mentions why it's a weird design, it's just, he just says, it's based on multiple different things, that makes it weird. Like, it's weird that you think that. I don't know. Moving on. Exeggutor. Luckily, he didn't say Alolan Exeggutor because I already mentioned that in his Dragon article video, and I guess he didn't want to, overlap too much, but he still couldn't help but bag on Exeggutor one last time. Exeggutor is a Pokemon that can employ both Grass and Psychic type moves to easily defeat opponents. The weird thing about this Pokemon is that it is a tree with multiple heads, and it evolves from a bunch of eggs. Okay. So, that's a common misconception. Here is Execute's Bulbapedia page. I'm going to Execute's page because he says he evolves from a bunch of eggs. If we go down to Execute's Pokedex entries, in its Fire Red Pokedex entry, so it's been around for a while, it specifically says, even though it appears to be eggs of some sort, it was discovered to be a life form more like plant seeds. And this is backed up in the Pokemon Y. Yeah, actually, mentioned the same thing happened again in the Pokemon Y Pokedex entry. In other entries, they do just refer to them as eggs, but at least in certain games, they refer to it as seeds. So even though these seeds are designed to look like eggs, they are seeds. So that checks out to evolve into a tree. Michael is curious how eggs can sprout into a tree, and also how this creature gains its psychic typing. So, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there, and assume he means, like, just the line in general, how it uses its psychic ability, how it gained it from, literal evolution, and not... I'm hoping he's not saying how it gains this psychic type when it evolves. Because Execute is also psychic type. And that's honestly kind of fair. Like, nothing in the Pokedex entries really explain why it has psychic ability. It just says it has telepathy to keep the eggs together. Which I guess could be enough. There's 6 of them all in a clump, so there's got to be something holding it together, I guess. But so telepathy, sure, why not? On top of that, Alolan Exeggutor is even weirder because it is a dragon type and how it has a ridiculously long body. Again, he's just gotta give another jab to Alolan Exeggutor for being a long boy and being a dragon type. That doesn't make it weird. Just stating that it is weird doesn't make it weird. Number 4, Carnivine. Carnivine is a very weird Pokemon. The main reason I personally don't like Carnivine, I think it's a fine designed Pokemon, but the reason I don't love it as a Pokemon is the fact that it has a levitate ability. I don't really care so much that, there's a lot of just random Pokemon that have the levitate ability. Essentially, if a Pokemon is floating in their sprite or in their official art, if they're floating for means that aren't just being a flying type, they almost always have to have the levitate ability. Like Flygon, why does it have the levitate ability? Vikavolt, why does it have the levitate ability? Solrock, Lunatone, and Claydol, that's fine. They're literally using their psychic ability to make them levitate. But I feel if you are to give the levitate or the levitate-like ability to all these other random Pokemon that are just kind of floating because they can fly like Vikavolt and Flygon, I feel, or even like Weezing, I feel you should give them a different ability with a different name that is like, I don't know, Rise or like Ascend or something like that's more hover. I don't know, something that's more general to other Pokemon that don't use their psychic or other abilities to make them levitate, as opposed to just having the means to fly anyway, and then give them the levitate ability. All that being said, I don't necessarily have a problem with those specific Pokemon having an ability like levitate because they literally do fly, or they literally do float in the air, but don't actually have the flying type. Carnivine, on the other hand, has the levitate ability despite not flying. It doesn't float. From what I could gather from all the Pokedex entries and other stuff, it uses its vines to like wrap around trees to hang on to stuff, but because in its sprite work and in its official artwork, it's just kind of floating there, they thought they needed to give it the levitate ability, which is so dumb. So dumb. That also means that in any future game after Gen 4, they could not give him a hidden ability, because as far as I know, every Pokemon that has the ability to levitate, barring now Alolan, Weezing, every single Pokemon that has levitate cannot have a secondary or hidden ability for some arbitrary reason. It would be cool to give Carnivine Strong Jaw or something like that, but nope. It has levitate even though it doesn't actually fly. In the anime, I think it like even uses vines to like stand on the ground, so it doesn't need to levitate. That's what makes it weird. So, all that being said, he doesn't bring up any of that. Carnivine was heavily featured in the anime because James had one of his own. This Pokemon has a giant mouth. And what makes it so unique is it's a very peculiar and standout design. I'm sorry. That's literally what I said earlier about you saying this Pokemon is weird because I think it's weird isn't that weird. What you say, what makes it unique is that it has a very peculiar and standout design. when it doesn't really. It's a pretty standard Venus Flytrap Pokemon. Like, he's honestly in the same tier as Sunflora of just like, here's the thing it's based on, so make that a Pokemon. Just don't be creative, just make that a Pokemon. This is pretty much what you get. A lot of Michaels often can't tell that Carnivine is a Venus Flytrap when first looking at it, because it has such a peculiar body that is different in many different ways, such as its leafy arms and large head. Are you implying that every single Pokemon fan are idiots? Because just look at it. It's obviously a Venus Flytrap. And you say they might not know it's a Venus Flytrap because of its large head and arms? Venus Flytraps have leaves on the side. It has a big snapping head. I don't know how you would look at that and think anything other than, hey, look, it's a Venus Flytrap Pokemon. Also, again, you did the thing where you're like, it's weird because it's weird when you say, because it has a peculiar body that is different in many different ways. If you just said peculiar in many different ways, I wouldn't have a big of a problem, but because you say peculiar in that is different in many different ways, that's wordy and redundant and bad. If I were an English teacher and I got that paragraph on an assignment, I would tell you to reword it, or at least get a thesaurus, or try to compact that a little bit so it's more concise. But no, the reason why he thinks it's a weird Pokemon, and the reason he thinks it's so peculiar, is the fact that you might not think it's a Venus Flytrap because it has Venus Flytrap features. Figure that one out. Carnivine also isn't very powerful. However, fans wouldn't know that because it has a terrifying appearance that looks like it will swallow trainers whole upon encountering them. That is terrifying. I'll give you that one. Again, he didn't. On all of these lists, even the ones where there's like 10 Pokemon that don't look like their type, but in both this and the other one I'll do later, there are so many. There's actually a couple of different Pokemon on those lists that he might actually have a strong argument for, but then just completely whiffs it. Carnivine is a weird Pokemon. Just look at it. It has weird Google eyes. It has the levitate ability for no reason. It's a weird Pokemon. Yet he doesn't. He had a good argument and he just doesn't go for it, and that boggles me. But moving on. Torterra. Torterra is the final evolution of Turtwig, a starter from Generation 4, and fans love it because it has such an interesting design. However, this interesting design is also looked at by Michael as not making a lot of sense because it seems that there is an entire ecosystem growing on its back. Yeah, it's based on the world tortoise from mythology. So, or if not the world tortoise, whatever the lion turtle from Avatar, whatever that's based on, if that is the world tortoise, it's based on a very similar thing to that. They just couldn't make it, 100 feet long because that would be ridiculous. Torterra has a tree growing out of its back, and also many plants that leave Michael wondering if there is straight up wildlife within the gardens. Time to go to Torterra's Bulbapedia page, because believe it or not, its Pokedex entries literally explain small Pokemon occasionally gather on its unmoving back to begin building their nests. Some Pokemon are born on Torterra's back and spend their entire life there. If you just read the Pokedex entries, the guy that constantly complains about Pokedex entries not explaining stuff clearly hasn't read the Pokedex entries. How does that make sense? If he just did just like a couple seconds of research on any of these Pokemon, he would see that the stuff he's writing is just wrong. Fans don't wonder if there's wildlife living on his back because the Pokedex entries tell you that there's Pokemon literally living on his back. It's not that weird. Even though Torterra is a weird creature, even though the only thing that you say is weird is the fact that there might be Pokemon living on his back, and there are Pokemon living on his back, so it's not weird. Players will forever enjoy using it during Pokemon battles in Sinnoh. Torterra is honestly another one that I could see arguments for it being a weird Pokemon, if not only for the fact that it's a little over-designed. Like, it has random rocks coming out of its face and rocks on its back that just, I don't know, it's a little much at times. But it's still a cool-looking Pokemon. But if you wanted to, argue that it's a little over-designed, I would completely agree with you on that. But he didn't do that. He was just like, the thing that is in all his Pokedex entries is what makes it weird. Because he must have known that the Pokedex entries exist, otherwise he wouldn't have thought that fans might think that Pokemon live on its back. I don't know. Moving on. Applin. I just talked about Applin in the Dragon type one. So I'm not actually going to read this entire one. He brings up very similar points of like, why is it a food Pokemon? Although, I will read the second paragraph. Because even though he complains about Applin again, being just an apple that lives and that's weird or whatnot, him complaining about Flapple in the next paragraph is just golden. Flapple is one of its evolutions, and it makes for a Pokemon that many Michaels can't understand very well. So why isn't Flapple on the list? Why is it Applin? Whatever. It seems that when it evolves, Applin turns into a creature that is both based on an apple, but also of another flying animal of some sort, and Michael finds it very weird that an apple could even ever be alive. So first of all, it seems to evolve into an apple and some other flying creature. You mean like a dragon? Because it's a dragon type? And dragons can fly? No? Okay. Also, you find it weird that an apple could even be alive? When Sunflora is on this list earlier? You don't find it weird that a sunflower can be alive? Or a Venus Flytrap can be alive, but you cannot wrap your head around the very idea of an apple gaining sentience in Pokemon. It's Pokemon. There have been Pokemon based on random things ever since Gen 1. How's a Geodude? How's a Geodude even alive? It's just floating there with big arms and mouth. How is that a thing? Then again, he did already in his electric article. He did mention it's weird that Magnemite exists. Like, how can a magnet be alive? So this is consistent with previous complaints, but still, singling out that Applin not making sense because why should an apple be alive means that you don't understand Pokemon. You cannot suspend your disbelief long enough to just accept, hey, why not an apple Pokemon? Sure. His Fungus entry is the one that made me make this list. I probably would have made this video regardless, mainly because of either the Torterra or the Carnivine one. Honestly, there's a lot of very strong bangers in here. If you just read the entry and if you just been to Bulbapedia once, you wouldn't have thought it was weird, or like he was almost there but didn't quite make it. So I probably would have already made the list video regardless, but this one just sealed the deal for how ridiculous his points are. So I'm just going to read the entire entry and then get back to you. Fungus is based on a fungus, and it's one of the only creatures to have this theme in the series. A lot of Pokemon fans wonder why the developers would choose to add a fungus-based creature into the franchise, because most players would never want to catch a creature such as Fungus. Fungus also has a Pokeball design on its head, and that makes it even weirder looking because a lot of fans question whether or not it was created by humans in some way to have this pattern. Fungus has gone down as one of the weirdest looking grass type Pokemon to ever be created, and with its oddly shaped head and facial expression, that is no surprise. Oh my goodness. Michael just hates this Pokemon. That entire paragraph was just him roasting this thing. And like, I don't like Fungus. It exists. I wouldn't be sad if it didn't exist, but like, I'm fine with it existing. It's not one that I look at and think it's a bad design. But the fact that Michael just goes in on this thing just doesn't stop. Like, let me just break down every single sentence in this entire segment. Fungus is based on a fungus, and it's one of the only creatures to have this theme in the series. There's actually at least 4 different fungus Pokemon that I can think off the top of my head. The Paris line, the Shroomish line, the Fungus line, and the Moralil line from Gen 7. That's at least 4 that I can think off the top of my head of. That's actually more than a lot of different Pokemon. There's only one Venus Flytrap Pokemon. There's only one Sunflora Pokemon. Even like, there's no Dolphin Pokemon. There wasn't a Sea Urchin Pokemon until Gen 7. Like, there are probably thousands, if not millions, of creatures or plants or just ideas out there in the world now that just haven't been touched on. Yet there are 4 different fungus-based Pokemon. So that's not that weird. Next sentence. A lot of Michaels wonder why the developers would choose to add a fungus-based creature into the franchise, because most players wouldn't ever want to catch a creature such as Fungus. Like, what? What? Do you just... Did a fungus eat your family? Like, what? You can't fathom why Game Freak would even put a mushroom Pokemon in a Pokemon game, even though there have been mushroom Pokemon since Gen 1. Like, that is weird. That is so... I want to sit down with Michael and ask him about this one specifically, because, like, clearly he has some beef with either Fungus or its evolution Amoonguss that I just can't understand. Next sentence. Fungus also has a Pokeball design on its head, and that makes it even weirder looking because a lot of Michaels question whether or not it was created by humans in some way to have this pattern. So I don't think this is in any of the Pokédex entries, but my theory is that it got that design, mainly because the developers, similar to Voltorb, just kind of wanted to trick the players with, because you think it's going to be a Pokeball on the ground, you try to pick it up, and it's a fungus instead. That's a kind of funny concept. But in the world of Pokemon itself, I think they either look this way to either try to not be attacked by other predator Pokemon because it just looks like a Pokeball, so they're not going to touch it, or to try to trick people not to mess with it. Like, they try to pick up the Pokeball that's on the ground, they touch it, and they get like Stun Sport or regular Sport or like hit by some other attack by Fungus instead. So I don't think it was created by humans. I think it kind of adapted to humans existing in this world and developed the design of a Pokeball to match that. Last sentence. Fungus has gone down as one of the weirdest looking grass-type Pokemon to ever be created, and with its oddly shaped head and facial expression, that is no surprise. Yeah, I got nothing. I don't. He just thinks this thing is unequivocally weird. I don't understand why. I don't know why he hates Fungus specifically so much, but he does. But yeah, it has little stubs. I don't really know how it gets around. I guess it kind of hops around, but like it it seems like such a weird thing to like roast Fungus specifically so much and then assume that everyone else hates him as much as you do. Going down is one of the weirdest looking Pokemon, but like most people probably just don't even really think about Fungus all that much. They're like, oh yeah, it's a Pokemon. Like, I don't know. So yeah, this list was very, very interesting. Like, almost all of these, he either just hates arbitrarily, doesn't understand their design, or hasn't played the game or read the Pokedex entries and just got major details wrong because they are weird. Like, if you're trying to make an argument, any kind of argument, like if you don't like a movie, you're not just going to say, oh, that movie is bad because I think it's bad, and that makes it bad. That's not an argument. You have to have specific points. You have to have evidence or specific opinions that's more than, I think it's bad. Same goes with this. You can't just say, I think Sunflora is weird because it's weird. Isn't that weird? That's wrong. If I were an English teacher and I saw that in an essay, I would probably give this no higher than a C, if not lower than that, because you didn't bring up any arguments, you didn't support your arguments, and any arguments you did have in any way, you clearly didn't go to the source material for the evidence. It anyway. Are there any grass types that you think are weird? Are there any Pokemon of any other types that you just think are just bad designs or just weird designs? I know he's done top 10 weirdest water types, and I'll get to that later. But are there any water types that you think are going to be on that list? Are there any water types? Are there any other types in general that you think just have a lot of weird Pokemon? I'll leave all that down below. I'd like to have a discussion going. And again, Michael, please keep. I want you to make 18 of these kinds of lists. I just love bagging on you so much, and like maybe I should feel bad, but I don't. See ya.